The universe has a twisted sense of humor. It spends years, decades even, lulling you into a state of beige, predictable complacency. And then, on a perfectly average Tuesday, it decides to spill a tanker truck of weaponized bubblegum all over your street. My Tuesday began, as most do, with a battle against mediocrity. The enemy, a picket fence. The mission? To install said fence with a level of precision that would make a NASA engineer weep with envy. According to Bylaw 11.b, paragraph 6 of the Primrose Landing Estates Homeowners Association Charter, a document I had studied with the intensity of a Talmudic scholar, any perimeter demarcation device had to be level within a 0.05 degree tolerance. A deviation of 0.06 degrees meant a $50 fine and a formal letter of reprimand written in a passive-aggressive font. I had my laser level out, its cheerful red dot dancing on the crisp white vinyl. I was cross-referencing its reading with a spirit level that had once been used to balance artillery pieces. My wife, Sarah, leaned out the kitchen window, a coffee mug in her hand, and a familiar look of loving exasperation on her face. "Alex, are you launching a satellite or just putting up a picket fence?" she called out, her voice laced with the kind of amusement one reserves for a golden retriever chasing its own tail. "Operational readiness, Sarah," I called back, not taking my eyes off the digital display. The difference between success and failure is in the millimeters. It's the difference between a secure perimeter and an open invitation to aesthetic chaos. Right, aesthetic chaos. Well, try not to declare war on the mailman again. He's still nervous around our driveway. She was referring to the incident last spring when I'd set up a motion-activated sprinkler system, calibrated for aggressive deer, I'd argued, that had soaked poor Mr. Gable down to his government-issue socks. A simple misunderstanding of engagement protocols. Primrose Landing Estates was the kind of place where the color palette ranged from oatmeal to slightly darker oatmeal. Every lawn was mowed to exactly 3 inches. Every mailbox was the same shade of funereal black, and every deviation was met with swift, bureaucratic justice by our benevolent dictator, Carol Peterson, president of the HOA. I'd moved here with Sarah because she loved the quiet, the safety. I saw it as the ultimate challenge, a low-threat environment that demanded high-level vigilance. I ran a small business from our garage, Suburban Tactical Response Solutions, or STRS. My business cards were printed on durable, waterproof polymer. My clientele mostly consisted of people like Mrs. Gable, who'd hired me to strategically remove a squirrel's nest from her chimney without disturbing her begonias. It wasn't exactly high stakes, but it paid for the gear. And oh, the gear. That's when the universe decided to stop laughing behind its hand and start cackling maniacally. It started with a sound that did not belong in Primrose Landing, the guttural scream of twisting metal, followed by a percussive crump that rattled the spirit level right off the fence post. I stood up, my senses instantly on high alert, my head swiveled towards the entrance of our quiet cul-de-sac. A plume of steam, or maybe smoke, was rising into the perfectly manicured sky. Neighbors, drawn by the sound like moths to a bug zapper, were stepping out onto their identical porches, their faces a mixture of confusion and mild annoyance that their morning tranquility had been breached. Then I saw it, and smelled it. A large, garishly decorated box truck from a company called Cosmic Candy Confections had somehow managed to jackknife itself, its trailer crumpled against the monolithic stone sign that read Primrose Landing Estates, an oasis of order. From a gash in the trailer's side, a liquid was pouring out. A thick, viscous, shockingly bright fuchsia liquid. It began to snake down the gentle slope of the street, an unnatural river of neon pink that defied the beige world it was invading. The smell hit me a second later. a cloying, sickly sweet aroma of a billion melted lollipops, so potent it made my teeth ache. My heart didn't pound with fear. It thrummed with a feeling I hadn't felt since my last qualification course. Pure, unadulterated exhilaration. My internal monologue, usually occupied with lawn care strategies and HOA bylaw analysis, switched to its operational mode. This is not a drill. Initial assessment, Class 3 suburban disaster, unidentified liquid agent, probable staining properties, potential biohazard, hot zone expanding at a rate of approximately 5 feet per minute, threatening the integrity of Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning petunias. Conventional first responders will be unprepared for the unique challenges of this environment. This was it. This was the moment Suburban Tactical Response Solutions was born for. My fence could wait. The neighborhood needed me. I didn't run. I executed a tactical retreat to my primary base of operations, the garage. My garage was my sanctuary, my fortress of solitude. Where other men had fishing gear and rusty lawn mowers, I had a symphony of organization. The walls were covered in pegboards, each tool nestled in a perfectly traced black silhouette. There were locked Pelican cases on industrial steel shelves, their contents clearly labeled in a bold, no-nonsense font. Biocontaminant, structural failure, aggressive fauna, the big one. And a new one I was particularly proud of, existential dread. I bypassed them all and went for the main locker. With a flick of the wrist, I unlatched it. Inside hung my STRS coveralls, a sturdy gray affair with reinforced knees and more pockets than a kangaroo convention. I shucked off my civilian clothes and zipped myself in. The familiar weight of the fabric settled on my shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. I checked my comms unit, a robust-looking headset that was, in reality, just a high-end Bluetooth device synced to Sarah's phone. "Comms check," I said to the empty garage. A moment later, Sarah's voice crackled in my ear, tinny and bemused. "Copy, Star Command. Do you read me?" "Loud and clear," I said, my voice low and serious. I grabbed a pair of impact-resistant gloves and pulled them on with a satisfying snap. "Alex, it's probably just food coloring. The fire department is on its way." She was standing at the threshold now, leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed. It was her official, "I am finding your intensity both exasperating and endearing" pose. "Sarah," I said, turning to face her with all the gravity I could muster, "there is no just, in-potential bioaccumulative staining agent. Think of the property values. Think of the concrete. That stuff is porous. If it sets, Gary's driveway will look like a crime scene from a Barbie movie for the next 50 years. I walked towards the centerpiece of my operation. My pride and joy. The modified Ford F-250 I called the Solution. It was painted a non-reflective shade of tactical gray and was equipped with enough auxiliary lighting to land a 747. But its crowning glory sat bolted into the truck bed, a custom-built decontamination foam rig. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, a network of tanks, pumps, and nozzles that could project a massive volume of specialized foam. I had nicknamed it the Peacemaker. I gave the primary tank a confident pat. "They're not equipped for this. I am." I looked from the rig to Sarah and back again. "We are." Sarah sighed, a long, drawn-out sound that contained years of love and acceptance of my particular brand of crazy. "Just try not to get foam on Carol's prize-winning roses. You know how she gets." "All due care will be taken to minimize collateral damage to non-essential flora," I assured her. With a final, heroic glance, I climbed into the cab of the Solution. The diesel engine rumbled to life with a satisfying roar. I flicked a switch, and a modest amber warning light on the roof began to strobe, just as the HOA charter allowed for private service vehicles in active operation. I backed the truck out of the driveway. The scene on the street had escalated from mild curiosity to low-grade panic. Neighbors were clustered on their lawns, pointing their phones at the advancing tide of fuchsia. They looked lost, helpless. As I rolled past, I gave them a reassuring, professional nod, the kind a bomb disposal expert might give to a terrified mayor. This wasn't a disaster. It was just another day at the office. My office. As I rounded the corner onto Primrose Lane, the full scope of the situation came into view. The cosmic candy truck was wedged tight, its front wheels hanging uselessly over Mrs. Gable's meticulously manicured flower bed. The Fuchsia River now covered half the entrance to the cul-de-sac. A single fire engine was parked 20 yards back, its red lights painting the scene in pulses of alarm. But its crew wasn't moving. They were standing in a loose, frustrated semicircle, their expressions a mix of disbelief and resignation. The reason for their inaction was a 5'4" impediment dressed in a salmon-pink pantsuit. Carol Peterson. She stood, feet planted, clipboard clutched to her chest like a ballistic shield, blocking the path of the fire engine. Her hair, a perfectly coiffed and unmoving helmet of silver, seemed to defy the morning breeze. She was the immovable object, the bureaucratic leviathan, the final boss of suburban order. I pulled the solution to a halt, a respectful distance away, and dismounted, leaving the engine running. I walked towards the standoff, my boots crunching on the pristine asphalt. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and impotent rage. Fire Chief Miller, a man whose face was permanently etched with the stress of dealing with things like cats stuck in trees, and, apparently, Carol Peterson, was pleading with her. "Ma'am, for the 10th time we need to get our hazmat team in here to assess the spill," he said, his voice strained. Carol adjusted her glasses and consulted her clipboard. "And for the 10th time, Chief Miller," she replied, her voice as crisp and cold as a starched napkin. "Your hazmat team is not on the approved vendor list for large-scale cleanup operations, as per the HOA charter, page 42, section C. We have a pre-vetted list for such eventualities. I've already left a voicemail with pristine pavement pros." "Ma'am, this isn't about a dirty driveway. That truck could be leaking anything." "The manifest says non-toxic fuchsia food dye #7, Carol sniffed, tapping a page on her clipboard. "I'm more concerned about your vehicle. It exceeds the gross tonnage permitted on Primrose Lane without a 48-hour pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee. You are currently in violation and accruing fines." She was trying to defeat a potential chemical incident with paperwork. It was the most powerful and terrifying thing I had ever seen. The firefighters looked like they were ready to turn the hose on her. This was my moment. This was where STRS bridged the gap between civilian ineptitude and official paralysis. I strode forward, projecting an aura of calm, competent authority. "Carol, Chief?" I said, my voice steady. I nodded to each of them in turn. "Alex Henderson, STRS. I'm a resident and a licensed and insured suburban response specialist. I have the equipment to contain this spill before it reaches the storm drain." Carol's eyes, magnified by her severe glasses, swiveled to me. It was a look that could curdle milk from 50 paces. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her lips barely moving, "your vehicle has unapproved commercial lettering. That's a $50 fine, and that thing in your truck bed is a flagrant violation of aesthetic standards under the Vehicle Modifications Addendum. This is a private community matter. The situation is under control. Stand down." The fuchsia ooze gurgled mockingly as it crept another 2 feet towards her own driveway. She didn't even flinch. For her, the real threat wasn't the river of pink goo. It was me. Chief Miller looked at Carol, then at the advancing pink tide, then at me. He was a man trapped between protocol and absurdity. He ran a hand over his face, sighed, and made a decision. He subtly, almost imperceptibly, shook his head and took a step back. It was a gesture of surrender. He was handing the field to me. I didn't need any more encouragement. The fuchsia ooze was now licking at the edges of Carol's own prize-winning rose bushes, the ones that had won the Primrose Prettiest Petals competition 3 years running. The irony was so thick you could spread it on a cracker, but it was completely lost on her. She was still glaring at my truck's logo. I gave a crisp nod to the exasperated fire chief. It was a silent, man-to-man acknowledgement. I've got it from here. I'm containing the threat, I announced to no one in particular, and jogged back to the solution. My hands moved with practiced efficiency. I vaulted into the truck bed, my boots landing with a solid thud. A sequence of chunky, satisfying switches needed to be flipped. Primary pump on. Mixture valve set to general containment. Pressure regulator engaged. I grabbed the nozzle of the main hose, a formidable piece of hardware that felt reassuringly heavy in my gloves. I braced my feet, aimed for the leading edge of the spill, and shouted, for the benefit of any potential litigation, "Deploying non-toxic biodegradable containment foam." Then I squeezed the trigger. The peacemaker roared to life. It wasn't a trickle, it was a deluge. A massive, shockingly white wave of thick foam erupted from the nozzle. It was a tidal wave of shaving cream, a glorious, billowing cloud of instant cleanliness. It shot across the asphalt and slammed into the fuchsia liquid. There was no mixing, no blending. The foam created a perfect, stark white barrier, 3 feet high, that completely halted the advance of the pink ooze. It was absurdly overkill. It was magnificent. A collective gasp went through the crowd of neighbors. The firefighters stared, their jaws hanging open. One of them let out a low whistle. For a glorious 10 seconds, I was the hero of Primrose Lane, the man who tamed the fuchsia tide. Then Carol found her voice. "What is that?" she shrieked, her face turning a shade of crimson that clashed violently with her pantsuit. "You are modifying the landscape without a permit. That is a level 4 infraction. This is anarchy. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the governor." She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling with rage. The foam wall stood pristine and resolute, a monument to my decisive action. Carol, however, looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. It took the local police about 7 minutes to arrive, which I thought was a respectable response time. A cruiser rolled up, parking behind the fire engine. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things and a general air of being 2 years, 3 months, and 4 days from a comfortable retirement. His name tag read Michaels. His partner was young, sharp, and had the earnest, slightly terrified look of a rookie who still believed the world made sense. His tag read Rodriguez. They were met with a scene that had clearly not been covered at the academy. A candy truck crashed into a sign. A street half-stained in Pepto-Bismol pink. A giant, inexplicable wall of white foam bisecting the road. A group of firefighters who were now openly taking pictures with their phones. An enraged HOA president clutching a binder like a holy relic. And me, standing proudly beside my foam cannon, coveralls and all. Officer Michaels stopped, put his hands on his hips, and slowly surveyed the tableau. "Okay," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone of pure weariness. "Dispatch said something about a hazmat situation and an HOA dispute. I was hoping they got 2 calls mixed up." Carol stormed towards them, her clipboard leading the way. "Officer, thank heavens! Arrest this man!" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He has deployed an unauthorized foam weapon on community property. He's a menace." I took a step forward, calm and collected. I had anticipated this contingency. I reached into a purpose-built pocket on my coveralls and retrieved a laminated business card. I offered it to Michaels. "Alex Henderson, Suburban Tactical Response," I said, my voice level. "I neutralized a Class 2 aesthetic contaminant spill after the primary response team was administratively blocked from the hot zone. The foam is a non-toxic, pH-neutral, biodegradable containment solution. No laws have been broken." Michaels took the card. He looked at it, then at me, then at the foam wall. A corner of his mustache twitched. Rodriguez, meanwhile, was leaning back towards the patrol car, speaking quietly into his shoulder mic. "Yeah, Sarge. You're not going to believe this," I heard him mutter. "No, sir, not a protest. It looks like a giant shaving cream incident?" "Yes, sir. The HOA is involved." Michaels spent the next 10 minutes patiently listening to Carroll's litany of broken bylaws, to Chief Miller's frustrated explanation of the initial call, and to my concise, tactical summary of the intervention. He walked over to the foam wall and poked it with his finger. He looked at the pink goo on the other side. He looked at my truck. Finally, he turned to Carroll, his expression one of profound exhaustion. "Ma'am, as far as I can tell, there's no criminal act here. It's a civil matter." He cleaned up a mess. "He made a bigger one," Carroll squawked. "It's soap, ma'am. It'll wash away," Michaels said, barely suppressing a sigh that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. He turned to me. "Son," he said, a glint of what might have been admiration in his tired eyes, "you've got quite a setup here. Maybe tone it down next time?" "I will take that under advisement, officer," I said with a nod. The cops got back in their car and left, shaking their heads. Carol looked as if she'd just been told the entire HOA charter was being replaced with a one-page pamphlet titled, "Be Cool." She shot me a look of pure venom and marched back to her house, no doubt to begin drafting a new set of amendments concerning unauthorized foam-based interventions. The immediate threat was contained, but the battle was far from over. As the crowd began to disperse, a man shuffled towards me. He was of medium height, with the pale complexion and hunted look of a man who spends too much time with spreadsheets. It was Gary, the owner of the now violated driveway. His eyes were wide with panic. You stopped it!" he stammered, looking at the foam wall as if it were the Hoover Dam. "But she..." "Take a deep breath, Gary," I said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Report. What's the situation?" "She won't let anyone in to fix it," he wailed, his voice cracking. "The driveway, it's a nightmare. I called 3 concrete cleaning companies from the approved list. She turned them all away at the gate. She said they didn't have the right liability insurance rider for novelty colorant spills. She just invented that. That's not a thing." He was near tears. The pink dye had seeped into his pristine concrete, creating a permanent-looking stain the shape of a screaming flamingo. Carroll's bureaucratic blockade meant he was trapped. His property value was plummeting with every passing minute. A new mission objective crystallized in my mind. The problem wasn't the foam. It wasn't the fuchsia. The problem was Carroll. My mission had shifted from containment to liberation. I was no longer just a hazmat specialist. I was a freedom fighter. "Gary," I said, my voice low and firm, "we are going to get your driveway clean. I give you my word." He looked at me with the desperate hope of a condemned man seeing a file baked into a cake. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to a new kind of warfare, contractor vetting. I retreated to my garage command center and got on the phone. This wasn't a simple Yelp search. This was an audition. I needed a contractor who wasn't just good with a pressure washer. I needed a warrior, a maverick who wouldn't be intimidated by a 60-year-old woman with a clipboard. The calls did not go well. My first call was to Pristine Pavement Pros, Carroll's preferred vendor. Hi, I began. I'm sourcing a team for a rapid response pavement restoration project in a high-risk administrative environment. What is your standard operating procedure for dealing with hostile, non-state actors wielding bureaucratic regulations as a tactical weapon? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. We wash driveways, dude. Click. The second call was no better. Can you describe your team's ability to infiltrate a semi-permissive zone under a compressed timeline while maintaining noise discipline? Click. Most of them hung up. One asked if I was a crank caller from a rival company. I was beginning to lose hope. I needed a professional. I needed someone who understood that sometimes a job isn't just a job. It's a campaign. After hours of fruitless searching, I was about to give up and design my own military-grade concrete resurfacing system. Then I found it. Buried on the fourth page of a Google search was a link to a website that looked like it had been designed in 1998. It was for Frank's Concrete and Masonry. The font was Comic Sans. There was a pixelated, rotating GIF of a cement mixer. But the reviews, posted on an ancient-looking guestbook page, were glowing. They spoke of Frank's no-nonsense attitude and his almost magical ability to fix the unfixable. I dialed the number. A voice like gravel being churned in a rusty drum answered. Frank's. I took a deep breath and launched into my pitch, this time refining my language. I explained the situation, the spill, the stain, and the logistical gatekeeper who was preventing the solution. I didn't use the word hostile, but I heavily implied it. There was a long silence. I thought he'd hung up. Then the gravelly voice rumbled, "Where you at?" An hour later, a rusty, dented Ford F-150 that looked like it had survived multiple apocalyptic events pulled up in front of my house. A man who seemed to be constructed entirely of cinder blocks and grudges climbed out. He was huge, with a bald head, a formidable beer gut, and hands that had clearly been used to punch rocks for fun. This had to be Frank. He lumbered up my driveway, and I led him to my garage command center. Sarah, ever the diplomat, had left a plate of cookies on my workbench. Frank ignored them. He stood in the middle of my perfectly organized garage, his massive presence seeming to suck all the air out of the room. He stared at the peacemaker rig in my truck bed. "That your work?" he grunted, jerking a thumb towards the foam-filled cul-de-sac. "Containment and control, yes," I said. He listened without a flicker of expression as I gave him the full tactical briefing on Carol, complete with her schedule, her known weaknesses, a pathological obsession with lawn edging, and her operational tactics, the clipboard, the charter, the soul-crushing gaze. When I was finished, he was silent for a full minute, just looking at me. I couldn't tell if he was about to laugh in my face or flatten me. Then, a slow grin spread across his face, cracking the stony facade. "So, let me get this straight," he rumbled. "You foamed the street because the Pink Panther had a traffic accident, and now Queen Elizabeth won't let me bring my pressure washer in to clean it up?" "That's an accurate, if reductive, summary of the tactical situation, yes," I confirmed. He let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "I've been trying to get a job in this neighborhood for 10 years. Every time she finds some reason my insurance isn't right, or my truck is too loud, or the moon is in the wrong phase. That woman is a menace." He looked from my face to the peacemaker and back again. The grin widened. "You know what? I'm in, but we do it my way, and your way." He stuck out a hand the size of a catcher's mitt. "This is going to be fun." I shook it. An unlikely, beautiful partnership had just been forged between tactical overplanning and blue-collar grit. We were going to war. My garage, my temple of tactical readiness, was officially transformed into a war room. I unrolled a large sheet of butcher paper on my primary workbench and, using a set of colored markers, drew a detailed schematic of the cul-de-sac. Key locations were marked with acronyms: AO, Area of Operations, Gary's driveway; T1, Target 1, Carol's house; and EZ, Extraction Zone, the street corner. Frank sat on a reinforced stool, drinking a beer he'd produced from a pocket in his work jacket, looking at my masterpiece with bemusement. "You really go all out, don't you, Slick?" "Attention to detail is the cornerstone of victory, Frank," I said, circling the storm drain in red. "This is our primary environmental concern. Secondary concern is Target 1's line of sight." Sarah came in, carrying a tray with 2 large deli sandwiches and a pitcher of iced tea. She set it down next to my map. She looked at Frank, then at my diagram, and just shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just so we're clear," she said, "you two are planning a covert operation to wash a driveway?" "This is about more than concrete, Sarah," I said gravely. "This is about liberty and hygiene." "Right. Well, try to have the war over by dinner. It's taco night." She patted my shoulder and left us to our plotting. We spent the next hour devising what I codenamed Operation Clean Slate. It was a thing of beauty, a multi-pronged strategy that leveraged both my tactical gear and Frank's real-world know-how. The plan was as follows. Phase 1. The diversion. We needed to draw Carol away from the AO. I'd done my reconnaissance. I knew her Achilles heel was a bylaw violation in progress. I'd recruited Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down, who harbored a deep-seated grudge against Carol ever since the bird feeder incident of 22. At precisely 0800 hours, Mrs. Gable would hang a large, multicolored, and offensively noisy wind chime from her front porch, a clear violation of Bylaw 17. C regarding auditory and visual nuisances. This would be our bylaw emergency. Carol, with her predator's instinct for non-compliance, would be unable to resist investigating personally. Phase 2. The infiltration. The moment Carol was engaged with the wind chime, Frank's 2-man crew, staged a block away in their unmarked van, would move in. Frank had calculated their operational window. "My guys can strip and clean a 3-car driveway in under an hour," he'd grunted. "Give us 90 minutes to be safe." Phase 3. The support. This was my role. I would provide overwatch. I had a small, quiet quadcopter drone I called the Eye in the Sky. I would deploy it to a tactically advantageous altitude to monitor Carol's position and provide real-time updates to Frank via our comms. Furthermore, I would deploy my own equipment to assist. "Your pressure washers are good, Frank," I'd explained, "but they're water-based. We need to manage drying time." I would bring my high-powered vehicle-mounted air compressor, a device normally used to inflate emergency evacuation shelters in under 60 seconds. We could flash dry the concrete, leaving no evidence of recent washing. Phase 4. The legal justification. The loophole. This was my masterstroke. I had spent the previous night poring over the 300-page HOA charter. And there, buried in a section about property maintenance, I found it. Article 8, Section D, Paragraph 2. Emergency repairs vital to the structural or aesthetic integrity of a property may be undertaken without prior written approval if a delay, as determined by a reasonable person, would cause irreparable harm or significant diminishment of property value. The fuchsia dye, a highly staining, fast-acting industrial agent, was the perfect definition of irreparable harm. We weren't just breaking the rules, we were following them, in an emergency capacity. Frank listened to the whole plan, took a long pull of his beer, and nodded slowly. "You're a weird dude, Alex," he said, "but I like it. Let's go clean a driveway." The next morning the air was crisp with anticipation. At 0755 hours, Frank's crew was in position. I was in the solution, parked in my driveway, running a final systems check. The eye in the sky was humming quietly on the passenger seat. At precisely 0800 hours, my comms crackled. It was Mrs. Gable. "The eagle has nested," she whispered dramatically. Through my binoculars, I could see it. A monstrous, gaudy wind chime, all clashing colors and discordant metal tubes glinting in the morning sun. It took less than 3 minutes. Carol's garage door opened. Her golf cart, the Inquisitor, as I called it, shot out onto the street and zipped towards Mrs. Gable's house with predatory speed. "Target is engaged," I hissed into my headset. "I repeat, the target is engaged. Go, Frank, go." A beat-up white van peeled around the corner and screeched to a halt in front of Gary's house. 2 guys in work clothes jumped out and started uncoiling hoses with a speed and efficiency that was truly breathtaking. Frank was right. These guys were pros. I launched the eye in the sky. The drone ascended silently, giving me a perfect bird's-eye view of the battlefield on my tablet. I could see Carol, clipboard in hand, lecturing a defiant-looking Mrs. Gable. I could see Frank's crew, already blasting the fuchsia stain into oblivion with 2 industrial-grade pressure washers. I rolled the solution forward and parked across the street, ready to provide support. Frank got out of the van and gave me a thumbs up. The roar of the pressure washers filled the morning air. It was a symphony of liberation. "How we looking on time?" Frank yelled over the noise. I checked the drone feed. Carol was now pointing furiously at the wind chime, then at her copy of the charter. "Eye in the sky reports target is stationary and gesticulating wildly. You have T-minus 45 minutes on the primary objective," I yelled back. Frank grinned. "Your leaf blower is bigger than my truck." "It's a directional vortex turbine, Frank, designed for rapid moisture displacement." The operation was proceeding flawlessly. The pink stain vanished under the high-pressure spray. Gary, the homeowner, was watching from his window, looking like he was witnessing a miracle. And then, a complication. "Alex, we have a problem," Frank's voice crackled in my ear. "One of my guys, Jimmy, he's new. He didn't tighten the main hose coupling to the spigot." I looked over. A geyser of water was now shooting 20 feet into the air from Gary's outdoor faucet, soaking his prize-winning azaleas. "Abort! Abort!" Frank was yelling at his guy. But it was too late. The commotion had drawn Carol's attention. I saw it on the drone feed. Her head snapped up. She ignored the wind chime, her eyes locking onto the chaos at the AO. She jumped back in her golf cart. "She's on the move!" I barked into the comms. "Target is inbound, ETA 2 minutes, bug out, I repeat, bug out!" Frank's crew moved like a whirlwind. Hoses were coiled, machines were loaded, but it was too late to escape cleanly. Just as they slammed the van doors shut, the Inquisitor came screeching around the corner, its electric motor whining in fury. Carol slammed on the brakes of her golf cart, executing a perfect handbrake turn that would have impressed a stunt driver. She came to a halt, blocking the van. Frank's crew was trapped. The driveway, however, was pristine. My directional vortex turbine had done its job. The concrete was already a pale, dry gray. Carol leapt from the cart, her face a mask of triumphant fury. Her finger, trembling with righteous rage, was already hovering over the 911 button on her phone. "You are all in violation!" she screeched, her voice echoing in the suddenly quiet cul-de-sac. "Trespassing, vandalism, unlicensed contracting, I'm having you all arrested." This was it, the final confrontation, the climax of Operation Clean Slate. I dismounted from the solution and walked calmly towards the center of the scene. In my hand, I held my own secret weapon, a crisp, new copy of the HOA charter, pre-bookmarked with a bright yellow sticky tab. I held it up, stopping her mid-rant. "Carol," I said, my voice calm and clear, No rules have been broken here. "What?" she sputtered. I opened the binder to the bookmarked page and began to read aloud, projecting my voice like a trial lawyer giving his closing statement. "Article 8, Section D, Paragraph 2, I announced. Emergency repairs vital to the structural or aesthetic integrity of a property may be undertaken without prior written approval if a delay, as determined by a reasonable person, would cause irreparable harm or significant diminishment of property value." I paused for dramatic effect, letting the words hang in the air. As this highly pigmented, fast-acting industrial agent, I continued, gesturing to the scene of the original crime, posed a clear and present danger of irreparable aesthetic harm to the concrete driveway, we were not only justified, but legally obligated by the charter itself to act immediately to mitigate the damage. I looked her dead in the eye. We have documented everything. I tapped the GoPro camera that was mounted to a tactical band on my forehead. Frank, leaning against his van with his arms crossed, chimed in. "Yeah," he grunted. "What he said. It was an emergency." Carol was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She had been cornered, outmaneuvered, and beaten with her own weapon. The charter, her holy scripture, had been used against her. Her face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a pale, defeated gray. Right on cue, a police cruiser pulled up. The window rolled down. It was Officer Michaels. He'd obviously drawn the short straw for dealing with Primrose Landing calls. He took in the scene. The clean driveway, the triumphant Frank, the defeated Carol, and me holding the rule book. A slow smile spread across his face. He didn't even get out of the car. He just looked at me, shook his head, and clapped a hand on his partner's shoulder. "Son," he said, his voice full of weary admiration, "you missed your calling." With that, he rolled up his window and drove away, leaving Carol standing alone in the middle of the street, her power utterly broken. In the quiet that followed the final standoff, a new reality settled over Primrose Landing. The cul-de-sac was clean. The fuchsia menace was a memory. Gary was so grateful he tried to pay us, but Frank and I just waved him off. A handshake, and the look of pure, unadulterated relief on the man's face was payment enough. Later that afternoon, Frank and I were in my garage, sharing a celebratory beer amidst the organized chaos of my equipment. The Peacemaker was wiped down and gleaming. The eye in the sky was charging on its dock. "You know, Alex," Frank said, taking a swig from his bottle, "you're nuts, completely out of your gourd. But you're good at what you do. I could use a guy like you, an operations manager." I smiled. "Thanks, Frank, but I think I'll stick to my own practice. I'm more of an independent contractor." "Suit yourself." He stood up to leave. "But if you ever decide you want to get into the legitimate home repair business, you call me." He clapped me on the shoulder with a hand that nearly sent me through the floor, and then he was gone, his rusty truck rumbling off into the sunset. The ripple effects of Operation Clean Slate were immediate. I was now a local legend. Some neighbors saw me as a folk hero, the man who stood up to the HOA. They'd give me a subtle nod or a thumbs up when they collected their mail. Others, the true believers in the old regime, now crossed the street when they saw me coming, as if my flagrant disregard for unwritten social contracts was contagious. The biggest change, however, came a week later. An email was sent out to the entire neighborhood. Carol Peterson had resigned as HOA president, effective immediately. Her letter, which was leaked within minutes, was a masterpiece of passive aggression, citing a fundamental breakdown of law and order and the rise of anarcho-syndicalist elements within the community. The neighborhood was free, but it was also adrift, like a ship that had just thrown its tyrannical captain overboard and now had no one at the helm. I stood in my garage that evening, polishing the nozzle of the peacemaker, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past few days. I'd spent years preparing for disasters, earthquakes, floods, zombie apocalypses. But the universe, in its infinite and sarcastic wisdom, had thrown a different kind of crisis at me. I'd come to realize that the tools of disaster prep, planning, logistics, decisive action, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the rules were surprisingly effective against the mundane disasters of everyday life, especially the bureaucratic ones. I was recalibrating the pressure gauge on my directional vortex turbine when my phone rang. It was an unknown number from a neighboring zip code. I answered with my professional greeting. Suburban Tactical Response, Henderson speaking. How can I help you? There was a hesitant voice on the other end, a man's voice, tight with anxiety. Hello? Is this the guy with the foam cannon? I paused. I prefer decontamination and containment specialist. But yes, that's me. Oh, thank God, the man breathed, a wave of relief in his voice. My name is Stan. I live over in Maple Creek Hollow. I got your number from a guy whose cousin lives in your neighborhood. He told me what you did. I provide solutions to complex suburban problems, I said carefully. Well, I've got one, Stan said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. See, our HOA board, they just passed a new regulation. It's about the precise shade of white you're allowed to paint your mailbox. It has to be whispering cloud. My wife, she just repainted ours yesterday. She thought she was doing a nice thing, but she used antique linen. He said antique linen like it was a four-letter word. She got the violation notice this morning, Stan continued, his voice cracking. We have 24 hours to comply or face a $200 fine. Stan, I can't tell her. It'll break her heart. She was so proud of that mailbox. Is this something you can help with? Can you deal with the HOA problem? I looked around my garage. I looked at the labeled Pelican cases, at the drone, at the schematics still taped to my workbench. My gaze finally settled on the Peacemaker, my beautiful, absurdly powerful foam rig gleaming under the fluorescent lights. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a man who has finally found his true calling. It turned out the suburbs were a war zone after all. The battle just wasn't fought with guns. It was fought with bylaws, paint swatches, and passive-aggressive newsletters. And I was the most over-equipped soldier on the battlefield. I cleared my throat, my voice taking on a new tone of professional confidence. Stan, I said, tell me everything you know about your HOA president's daily routine. Suburban Tactical Response Solutions was entering a new era. The enemy wasn't chaos anymore. It was compliance, and business was about to be very, very good.